Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong section.
she said, blocking the aisle with her perfectly polished shoes. The flight attendant's shout was sharp enough to cut. Every head in first class turned. The woman she was talking to, a visibly pregnant black woman in a soft cream maternity dress, looked down at the boarding pass in her trembling hand. Seat 2A, clear as daylight. I believe this is my seat, she said, voice steady but quiet. The attendant's eyes flicked over her outfit, her braids tied into a low bun, her swollen feet in flats instead of heels, and then to the man in a suit already seated beside 2A, who smirked as if enjoying the show. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, the attendant replied, louder this time, as if performing for the rows of curious passengers. Economy class is just down that way. Her words hung in the air, heavy, humiliating. The pregnant woman's fingers tightened around her boarding pass. The cabin was silent except for the faint hum of the air vents. Somewhere behind her, someone chuckled. She took a breath. Check it again. But the attendant didn't move. Instead, she gestured for security. And that's when the murmurs began, quiet, ugly whispers that rippled down the aisle. Probably upgraded herself. Scam artist. Always trying to get special treatment. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know who was watching. But they were about to find out. Because 10 minutes later, the captain would make an announcement that would silence the entire plane. Her name was Ava Sinclair, 31 years old, 7 months pregnant, and exhausted from a week of traveling. She had just finished speaking at a women's leadership summit in Atlanta, representing a nonprofit that helped minority women launch businesses. Now, all she wanted was to get home, to her husband, her mother, and the nursery she hadn't finished painting. But as she stood frozen in that aisle, clutching her boarding pass, Ava felt a familiar ache spread through her chest. That quiet humiliation she'd known since childhood. That look, the one that said you don't belong here. The flight attendant, her name tag read Melissa, stepped aside just enough for a second attendant, Tom, to approach. He didn't even look at Ava. He just asked, "What seems to be the problem?" Melissa's voice was syrupy sweet. "She's claiming seat 2A, but I believe there's been a mix-up." Ava swallowed hard. "There's no mix-up. I paid for this seat. You can check your system." Melissa didn't. Instead, she gave that small, condescending smile that people use when they think they're right, or when they think you won't fight back. "Why don't we have you step to the side while we sort it out?" she said. The aisle was narrow, but the wall of eyes watching her made it feel even tighter. Ava's stomach tensed, not just from embarrassment, but from the baby's sudden kick. She took a slow breath and stepped aside. Behind her, a white couple whispered loud enough for her to hear. "Some people just can't take no for an answer." Ava turned slightly. The man avoided her eyes. His wife smirked. From the corner of her vision, Ava noticed the man in 2A, a middle-aged executive type, gold watch gleaming, pretending to scroll through his phone. When Melissa leaned down to whisper to him, he nodded without hesitation. "Sir, did you check in with this seat?" she asked, her tone softer now. "Of course," he said. "Frequent flyer upgrade." Melissa smiled approvingly and turned back to Ava. "See? Looks like that seat's taken. I'll have the gate agent handle your situation." "My situation?" Ava repeated, her voice cracking on the last word. "You mean the seat I paid for?" Tom crossed his arms. "Ma'am, if you can't cooperate, we'll have to ask you to deboard until we verify your ticket." That word, deboard, hit her like a slap. Passengers shifted, pretending to be absorbed in their phones, but watching every second. Ava's vision blurred. She was tired, hungry. Her ankles were swollen, and now the baby kicked again, as if sensing her distress. But she wasn't going to cry. Not this time. At the gate entrance, a uniformed officer waited, the security Melissa had called earlier. He looked more confused than aggressive, but the optics were enough. To the passengers, it looked like confirmation. A guilty woman caught lying. Ava's cheeks burned as she stepped back out of the cabin, the whispers following her like smoke. A gate agent, Sandra, rushed over, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, what's going on?" "She's trying to sit in a seat she doesn't own." Melissa interjected quickly, her tone filled with righteous authority. Ava raised the boarding pass. "Check the name." Sandra took it. Her eyes darted across the screen, once, twice, and then she froze. "Ms. Sinclair," she said slowly, "this is first class. Seat 2A. Melissa blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Sandra turned the tablet for her to see. It's confirmed. Purchased weeks ago. Through Sinclair Holdings' corporate account. Ava didn't say a word. She just looked at Melissa, not with anger, but with that weary, knowing silence that said you've already done enough. But Melissa wasn't ready to back down. There must be an error, she insisted, glancing nervously toward the man still sitting in 2A. Maybe her company upgraded her without authorization. Sandra frowned. Even if it did, that's not your call to make. The gate around them had gone quiet again. Passengers nearby pretended not to listen, but every phone camera was discreetly raised, recording. Ava could feel it, that slow shift in the air. The tide is turning. As Sandra typed something into her tablet, Ava's mind drifted back to a night 3 years ago, when her husband had found her crying after a networking event. A security guard had mistaken her for catering staff and told her to clear plates from the VIP table. She had laughed it off then, but the pain had stayed. Her husband, Ezekiel, had cupped her face and said, "Someday, they'll know your name before you even walk in." Now, standing in this airport, belly full with their child, Ava felt the echo of those words like a pulse under her skin. Sandra's expression softened. "Miss Sinclair, I deeply apologize. Please, come back on board. We'll handle this." Ava nodded, slow and dignified, but her eyes were glassy. As she walked back down the jet bridge, the whispers started again, not cruel this time, but guilty, uncertain. When she entered the cabin, the man in 2A looked up, startled, as Sandra leaned down and said, "Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass." He hesitated. "Now," Sandra repeated. He handed it over, and the truth surfaced instantly, a standby upgrade that hadn't been cleared. Melissa's face drained of color. Sandra's tone was firm. "Sir, you'll need to move to your original seat." The man muttered something about honest mistake as he stood, avoiding Ava's gaze. Ava slid into 2A, finally. The leather was cool against her palms. But the moment felt hollow, like a victory stolen of joy. She fastened her belt, eyes fixed on the window. Melissa hovered in the aisle, voice trembling now. "Ma'am, can I get you anything?" Ava didn't answer. She just whispered under her breath, "Just let me breathe." The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be departing shortly." But then, mid-sentence, his tone changed. "And before we begin, I want to personally welcome one of our VIP passengers on board today, Mrs. Ava Sinclair." The cabin stirred. Melissa froze. The captain continued, "She's traveling home after an incredible week representing the Sinclair Foundation, founded by her husband, Mr. Ezekiel Sinclair, one of our airline's largest investors." Every whisper died. Every phone lowered. Ava didn't look up. She didn't need to, because in that single moment, everyone realized. The woman they had humiliated was married to the man who owned the skies they were flying through. The cabin went completely still. Ava could hear the faint mechanical whir of the air vents, the nervous shuffle of shoes against carpet, the small, stunned intake of breath from Melissa, the flight attendant who'd humiliated her. Every passenger's eyes were locked on Ava now, not with disdain this time, but with dawning realization. Melissa's voice wavered. I didn't realize." Ava turned slowly, her tone calm and measured. "You didn't need to realize who I was," she said softly. "You just needed to respect who I am." That was it. The single line that froze the air in first class. Calm. Devastating. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed again. Tom, the second attendant, avoided eye contact entirely. The captain's voice returned over the intercom, clearing his throat. "We thank Mrs. Sinclair and the Sinclair Foundation for their continued partnership and contributions to our airline's Global Women in Leadership initiative." The applause started hesitantly, a few scattered claps, and then grew until the whole cabin joined in. But Ava didn't smile. She just looked straight ahead, one hand resting on her belly. The damage had already been done. When the plane landed 2 hours later, Ava was escorted off first, not by security this time, but by the airline's head of customer relations, who had been urgently contacted mid-flight. The woman introduced herself nervously. "Mrs. Sinclair, I'm..." Ava raised her hand gently. "I know who you are. Let's talk somewhere private." They stepped into a glass-walled office overlooking the runway, sterile, quiet, and cold. Melissa and Tom were already there, standing stiffly beside their manager, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in a single flight. Ava sat down slowly, her poise unshaken. Her voice was steady, but the undertone was surgical, precise, and controlled. "I'm not here for apologies," she began. "I'm here for accountability." The manager cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sinclair, we want to express our deepest regret for how you were treated. This is not who we are as an airline." Ava's eyes didn't waver. "You said that in your last diversity campaign," she replied quietly. "The one my foundation helped fund." The words hit the table like a dropped stone. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, fingers twisting her pen. Tom looked at the floor. Ava pulled her phone from her purse and slid it across the table. On the screen, a video already trending online. Over 400,000 views. Captioned, "Pregnant woman denied seat in first class until the pilot said this." The thumbnail showed Melissa's face mid-sneer. The room went silent. Ava leaned back. "I didn't post this," she said softly. "Your passengers did. But it's not just a viral clip now. It's evidence." She reached into her bag again and pulled out a document. A letterhead gleamed with gold-embossed text. "Sinclair Foundation, Legal Department." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Section 12.4 of your airline's employee code," Ava recited, "prohibits any form of discriminatory behavior based on race, gender, or perceived socioeconomic status. Violations are grounds for immediate termination and required diversity retraining." The manager blinked, caught off guard. "You're familiar with our handbook?" Ava's lips curved slightly. "I wrote it." The realization hit like a quiet explosion. Ava Sinclair wasn't just an investor's wife. She was the woman behind the Sinclair Corporate Ethics Initiative, the very policy framework the airline had adopted 2 years earlier. Melissa's breath caught. I didn't know." Ava turned her gaze toward her. "That's the problem," she said, voice cool as glass. "You don't have to know someone's name to treat them like a person." No one spoke for several seconds. Then Ava slid another paper across the table. "This," she said, "is a formal request for a full review of your staff training procedures. Effective immediately." The manager nodded quickly, fumbling for a pen. "Of course. We'll begin today." Ava stood slowly, one hand bracing her lower back. "I'll be expecting your written report within a week," she said. "Send it directly to my office." She started to walk toward the door, then paused, turning back slightly. "Oh," she added, "and I recommend both attendants take a temporary leave while that review is underway. It'll reflect better on the airline than waiting for me to issue a press statement." It wasn't a threat. It was policy, and everyone in that room knew it. Ava sat in her car outside the terminal, the city lights shimmering across her windshield. She finally exhaled, a long, trembling breath that seemed to empty a week's worth of pain. Her phone buzzed. It was her husband, Ezekiel. "Home yet?" "Just leaving," she said softly. "You okay?" A pause, then a small, tired laugh. "I'm fine. Just reminded." "Of what?" "That power doesn't mean peace," she murmured. "You can have all the titles, all the influence, and still, someone will look at you and only see what they want to see." Ezekiel's voice was gentle but firm. "And what did you see?" Ava smiled faintly. "That our work isn't done." By the next morning, the video had reached over 2.3 million views. Major news outlets picked it up. Headlines read, "Pregnant Black Executive Humiliated in First Class. Airline Under Fire." Sinclair Foundation Investor's Wife Faces Discrimination on Partner Airline. The airline's PR department went into overdrive. Press statements. Apologies. Crisis meetings. But the internet wasn't buying it. People weren't just outraged. They were organized. Women began sharing their own travel stories under the hashtag Let Her Sit. By noon, it was trending globally. Meanwhile, inside the airline's headquarters, the CEO, a man who'd once boasted about inclusive culture on LinkedIn, was pacing his glass office, sweating through his collar. He looked at the printed reports his assistant brought in. Loss projections, $2.4 million in canceled bookings. Brand sentiment, down 47%. Investors, furious. At the top of that list was Sinclair Holdings. The CEO sighed, rubbing his temples. "Set up a meeting," he said. "Today." Ava and Ezekiel sat across from the board. Ezekiel's presence was quiet but commanding, the kind of power that didn't need to be announced. The CEO started nervously. "Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, let me begin by saying how deeply sorry we are." Ezekiel raised a hand. Apologies won't rebuild trust, he said calmly. Action will. Ava unfolded a document from her folder. Here's what we're proposing, she said. A full audit of your customer service and diversity compliance systems, funded jointly by Sinclair Foundation and your board. Publicly disclosed. The CEO blinked. Publicly? Yes, Ava replied. Transparency builds accountability. Ezekiel leaned forward slightly. And we'll be assigning an independent oversight team. If your company refuses, Sinclair Holdings will divest from all airline partnerships immediately. The CEO's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Understood. Ava glanced toward the two attendants seated near the back of the room, Melissa and Tom. Melissa looked pale, on the verge of tears. Ava addressed them directly. I don't believe in destroying people, she said softly. I believe in educating them. You'll both be given the option to attend a full racial sensitivity and customer ethics program under the Sinclair Fellowship. Complete it, and you can reapply. Melissa nodded rapidly, tears spilling now. Thank you, ma'am. I will. Ava stood, gathering her folder. Then learn from this, she said. Because the next woman you meet may not forgive so easily. And with that, she left the room, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, each step an echo of quiet power. 6 months later, the world had moved on, but the lesson hadn't faded. Airlines across the country had begun revising their employee conduct policies. Customer training programs were redesigned to include empathy, cultural awareness, and implicit bias education. And at the heart of it all, the Sinclair Foundation's Let Her Sit initiative, launched in Ava's name. The program funded free travel for pregnant women in underprivileged communities who needed to fly for medical or family emergencies. It became a symbol of dignity, a simple promise. Respect should never require recognition. Ava sat on her porch one evening, sipping ginger tea as the sunset washed the sky in gold. Her baby girl, Nia, cooed softly in her arms. Ezekiel joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Do you ever think about that flight? He asked. Ava smiled faintly. Sometimes, but not with anger. With clarity. Clarity. That silence, when everyone realized who I was. It shouldn't take power to earn respect, she said quietly. It should take humanity. Ezekiel kissed her temple. And you reminded them of that. Ava looked down at Nia, her daughter's tiny fingers wrapping around hers. She'll grow up in a world that sees her, not for the seat she's in, but for the strength she carries. The baby yawned, eyes fluttering closed. Ava exhaled, letting the wind carry away the last weight of that day. Narrator's tone softens, deliberate, reflective. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with noise. It walks in quietly, with paperwork, with policy, with proof. Humiliation may echo for a moment, but dignity echoes forever. Because respect isn't earned through title or wealth. It's a right, one we all owe each other. So if you've ever witnessed someone being silenced, dismissed, or humiliated, don't look away. Stand up. Speak out. Because you never know who that person truly is, or how far the ripples of your silence might reach. This was Black Echo Stories, where silence ends and justice begins.